welcome to Just After My Bedtime, the only show that wanted its own sitcom until it realized that idea was no longer. I'm your host, Sal G. And tonight, we asking the question, where did all the sitcoms go? I mean, there was a time, not long ago, when upwards of 20 to 30 million people watched the same episode of a show at the same time. Not, I'll catch it later, not, I'm 4 seasons behind, but all together at the same exact time. You see, in the 90s, if you missed Thursday night TV, you were socially bankrupt on Friday morning. You couldn't talk, you couldn't relate, and suddenly you had no personality at lunch. Your only saving grace was that it was indeed Friday, and that was back when we didn't think of the initials TGIF as a chain restaurant. See, back then, sitcoms were simple. Bright lights, 3 walls, a couch nobody could realistically afford, a laugh track that gave you more affirmation than your last relationship, and most importantly, a theme song that you remember like it was your best friend's phone number, because back then, you actually had to remember your best friend's phone number. Back then, originally they used what I like to call the holy trinity of sitcom structure. First, we got the setup. Husband walks in, sees dirty dishes in the sink, and wife on the couch crocheting. Then comes the reinforcement. He says, oh, okay, cool, we're starting a museum of unfinished tasks around here. And to finish it all off, we got the artificial euphoria. This is the part where the audience reacts like he just solved marriage as a whole. You see, that was power. The format was called multicam, shot on stage, live audience, big time, and bigger punchlines. And that started way back with early television. Stage-style comedy, built from vaudeville and radio. The laugh track wasn't an accident. It was reassurance. An audio hug, if you will. It commanded you to laugh and let you know this is funny. Trust us. And so, America trusted it. Then something happened. And that something was streaming, or DVR as it was called back then. TiVo if you're nasty. And cable exploded, but the monoculture died. We used to argue about one episode. Now we recommend shows nobody starts, and damn sure will never finish. There's no longer one sitcom dominating the conversation. Instead of 30 million people watching one show, we got 3 million people watching 10 different shows, and 20 million watching murder documentaries before bed. And then came the mockumentary revolution. Shows like The Office, 30 Rock, and Abbott Elementary, to name a few. They ditched the laugh track. Hell, they ditched the studio audience too. And they added side eyes to the camera like we were all accomplices. And also added a confessional like we were all watching the real world. And that new format came with a new rhythm. First, the premise. Someone says something mildly unhinged, then the echo or lack thereof because nobody laughs, which leads to the release, where the character stares directly into the lens like us, the audience, are the only ones sane in the scene. And for some reason, it keeps our attention because it felt real. But here's the twist. Single cam shows look cinematic. They feel prestige. But they're more expensive, harder to produce, and way slower to shoot. Which takes us to what happened next, when the comedy shows got, well, sort of complicated. With these new shows like Atlanta, Barry, or The Bear, where there's clearly some hilarious undertones. But where do we put these category-wise? I mean, are they dramas? Because let's face it, they do get dark through some stretches. And you can't help but notice that these shows are even more uniquely structured. The episodes usually start with some quirky banner to set us up. Then comes the emotional shift, the infamous character backstory trauma. And by the end of the episode, you're Googling and asking yourself, why am I like this? They're basically comedy with beer goggles that almost morphs into drama. We didn't lose sitcoms overnight. We prestiged them to death. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Younger audiences don't like laugh tracks. They hear canned laughter and think, why are you telling me when to laugh? Actually, scratch that. They simply say, that's cringe, or some other verbiage that makes no sense in this context. But back then, the laugh track was community, but now it sort of feels like manipulation. So in turn, watching a show full of jokes today goes a little something like this. A supposed hilarious joke is delivered. Then, the audience stares aimlessly in dead air while simultaneously laughing at a random clip on their phone with the audio turned up. Then, you check the comments section and it's full of people claiming, this is so hilarious, I'm screaming, but actually sitting completely silent. Not to mention, while mentioning, they didn't even watch the episode. They saw a clip of the joke totally out of context on TikTok. So yeah, we don't watch together anymore. We binge alone, much to the dismay of our significant others at times, on phones, under blankets, while ignoring texts from actual humans. You see, sitcoms were built for togetherness. And today, streaming, much like everything else in our lives, is built for isolation. So where did the sitcoms go? Because they surely didn't disappear. And I know what you're thinking. Sal, what about The Neighborhood on CBS? That's still on and has a laugh track and it's doing just fine. And your boy Mike Epps got The Upshaws on Netflix and that's on season 7. That's gotta count for something, right? Well, technically, yes. But let's be honest, those aren't the rule. They're the exceptions. So today, what option does that leave other sitcoms? Well, they just did what everything else from the late 1900s and early 2000s did. The good ones went into syndication as nostalgic pieces, and the others were fragmented and forced to evolve. I mean, I would say they graduated, but nah, they dropped out, but somehow turned into cinematic half-hour identity crisis. They stopped being comfort food, if you will, and became thought-provoking, and most times, award winners. And here's the real punchline. We say we don't want laugh tracks, but we also say we miss simpler times. You can't have nostalgia without the cheesiness that came along with it. You also can't have the cozy without the predictability. And you definitely can't have a classic sitcom without somebody walking through a door at the exact wrong moment. So what happened to our beloved sitcoms, you ask? They once ruled the culture, and then they lost the culture. And now they're like everything else, this show included. Fighting for screen time between a cooking show and a true crime podcast about a guy who poisoned his roommate's ex-girlfriend's pet snake when it was his weekend to babysit out of spite, which was a surprisingly interesting episode, believe it or not. So sitcoms didn't die. We stopped sitting together in one room, laughing at the same time. Now all of us who actually enjoyed sitcoms feel like,
how come you don't want me, man?
While standing in an empty 3-wall set for the final time on a genre that raised us. But for real though, sitcoms didn't disappear. What actually ended up happening was real life stopped being funny. And we started arguing about whether or not that last joke should have even been allowed today. Which in turn is how we lost the plot. Man, y'all like comedy shit. Y'all take care. Peace.